Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about a question that I had, and it's kind of a follow-up comment to something I said in a vlog. It'll be at least a month ago at this point. You guys got to remember the training vlogs are done on the day of. A lot of these informative videos are filmed 5 or 6 weeks before I upload them. I have a very, very large library of them accumulated, so they come up when they come up. I just make them in my spare time when I'm bored. So I have enormous amounts of them laying around, like 100 plus at sometimes. Actually, at the time of this one being made, I have 101 of these sitting here not uploaded. So it's going to be a little while. But someone had said, and they said it really snooty, they're like, oh, you said before just recently that the deadlift, and you guys need to understand, when I say the word the deadlift, I mean the conventional deadlift. That is what I'm referring to, which is not what you're seeing me do anywhere in this video. These are all variations. The conventional deadlift is not a particularly good hypertrophy exercise. I've said that repeatedly, and it doesn't apply to novice lifters, by the way. And I've covered before why that doesn't apply to novice lifters, because we don't care about stimulus to fatigue and axial loading. Look, if you only deadlift 185 pounds, we don't care. It just doesn't apply to you. But I have also said that deadlifting in general will grow your lats. Now, when I say that, does that mean that you're going to have lats like mine just from deadlifting? Probably not. No. But they'll grow, and they'll grow a lot if you do tons and tons of pulling. And there's a couple things to keep in mind here. I'm saying deadlifting in general, especially any sort of hypertrophy-oriented deadlifting, which is a lot of what I do. Speed pulls, deficit work, all this stuff, right? The things that we know are better for hypertrophy than a plain conventional deadlift. All right? Speed pulls particularly. Speed pulls are hypertrophy. They'll get you bigger. But it's a different beast, isn't it? It has to do with training volume, axial loading, all of that stuff. So here's the point we come to with deadlifting in general, and this would include the variations of the deadlift that we know are better for hypertrophy, which are things like deficit pulls, snatch grip deadlifts. Okay, all the people who are experts out there who claim the deadlift isn't great for hypertrophy will actually endorse those lifts pretty commonly. How about speed sumos, right? Particularly against those bands. Banded speed pulls. It didn't have to be sumo, it can be conventional. What's going on with our lats on all of these? We are having to contract them isometrically. Okay, we're contracting them isometrically. You know, and ironically, for a long time, we had that whole fad of people talking about the above the knee rack pull for the traps, which is really just an isometric stretch. It's not an isometric contraction. And I've tried to argue before with people that, yes, you will grow from that. Don't get me wrong, there is a hypertrophic stimulus. It's not optimal. It's not even particularly great. But when we look at what happens on the deadlift, you look at what happens in terms of forces, and I'm using all of these for deadlifting. Let's talk about deadlifting. Especially the deficit stuff, or the pulls against bands. Okay. On deficits, you have to bend over even more. You require a much harder isometric contraction of pulling the scapula together because you have to bend over further. Okay. The weight is pulling on your arms and trying to pull your scapula apart, and you maintain scapular retraction. All right. This is an isometric peak contraction being held against a heavy weight. Now, how many guys out there will talk about in the middle of their lat pull downs or their pull-ups or whatever, squeezing the shoulder blades together? They'll talk about it, but they're using no weight. I mean, realistically here, there's no appreciable weight there. We're using very, very light weights and squeezing the muscle at its strongest point in the contraction. Okay, our lats are stronger there. Now, you'll get some stimulus, but the same people who will tell you to do that will deny that the deadlift will do anything. Well, the deadlift does exactly what you're doing when you squeeze those shoulder blades together, but possibly with double, triple, 4 times, maybe 5 times the amount of weight, that you're squeezing against with those other movements. Okay, you are getting an isometric peak contraction and holding it for the whole rep because you have to. Okay, you have to, especially the first part of the rep, breaking it off the floor. And then it can be amplified when we're doing stuff like banded work, right? Heavy bands. Because, people will see those and they're like, oh, well, how much band tension is that? It's what? Maybe 100? No, that's 225 pounds of bands. So that's how much extra band resistance I'm adding. It's over 200 pounds. Okay, that's being jerked, and it jerks against you. So you take something like people who are doing speed pulls, and if you're a serious lifter or you follow the training systems I advocate, so again, everything I say is in the context of the training systems I promote. Okay, if I promote conjugate when I talk about lifting, you know that my lifts are in the context of a conjugate system, which is how I train. It's what I coach for. At this point, 80+% of my clients are on conjugate. It's what I promote. It's what I coach. You're going to be doing speed pulls. And when you do speed pulls against bands, that jerking effect tries to jerk your scapula apart, particularly back on the eccentric rep. You are getting a ridiculous isometric contraction in your traps and your lats on the eccentric on your speed pulls against bands or any heavy pull against bands. You get a pump in that whole area. You absolutely feel it. It's tremendous. Now, am I saying that this is enough to maximize your middle back development? No, I am not saying that. Is it enough to cause significant muscle growth on its own? Yes. Will it add to the cumulative effect of your overall training? Because when we talk about training loads and training volume, we understand that it's the cumulative amount of weekly volume that you do and work that you do that causes the muscle growth. Okay? This is understood. It's not about that one set. It's about the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20 sets that you did throughout the week that work a muscle. It's about that total cumulative work done and the muscle fiber recruitment and adaptation around it. Not about the one set. Well, this adds up real fast. If you're doing a lot of different pulling, it adds a ton of extra volume to those muscles in the back. They're having to contract isometrically. What does that mean? That means that you won't have to do as much other back work to make it grow. Because if we're talking about total volume, how many lat pull downs and rows do you need if you're doing all these speed pulls and max pulls and other stuff also? You don't need as many to stimulate nearly maximum or optimal levels of hypertrophy in those muscles because you're getting another training stimulus. It's cumulative. And we can feel that isometric. We know it works. Is it giving a dynamic in the entire range of motion? No. But if you're adding it together and you're doing other full range of motion dynamic movements, such as a lat pull down or a row or whatever, right? Pull-ups. I don't advocate pull-ups these days anymore, but it's fine. You might like them, enjoy them, and find they don't injure you. By all means, proceed. It'd be a great exercise. So, it's the cumulative effect of those. Those do move the muscle through a full range of motion, and then you're doing this and adding an additional, very significant training response. If you don't think a training response is there, we see it even on EMGs. Now, am I saying that EMG studies are the be-all, end-all? No, they are not. There are problems with EMGs as far as muscle activation versus growth. They're not the best tool. Can they give us some useful data? Can they point us in a good direction? Yes. They're certainly not a definitive guide to what's stimulating muscle growth because they can actually be wrong in that regard. But look at any of the EMG studies that have been done looking at deadlifts and deadlift variations versus other movements in the lats. On some of them, they show higher activation of the lats on the EMG. Now, does higher activation in the muscle at that level always equal more growth? No. In some cases it doesn't. And I would suggest that the deadlifts probably for the lats are one of those cases. But does it mean that it's getting really good, solid activation? And that added into the context of a larger program could give some pretty good growth? Yes. Could it give good growth on its own? Yes. Are you going to get maximum growth? No, I don't think that you would. But you can build pretty big lats by doing tons and tons of deadlifting. Okay? You can. And that's the point I was making. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.